It's fine for me.
Want you to cut out. You got a very loud projecting. Are we ready to start? How's that? Can you hear me now? I can hear you, but I'm right in front of this. I'll go ahead and open up prayer. Yes. All right. Do we have any prayer requests for tonight? We're going to get started with prayer. So, we got any prayer requests? I know, was it today or early this morning, Turkey got hit with two really serious earthquakes, Turkey and Syria. They hit with a 7.8. And then as people got out to start clean up, they got hit with a 7.5. And there's this video of buildings coming down as people are still in the streets, like wondering, what's going on. And so it's pretty bad over there. There's probably, I think the last I saw, there's over 1 million injured. And
to that, I want to pray for them because I lived there. I lived in Adana, Turkey for 2 years when I was with the Air Force. And it's a beautiful town, or it was.
Yeah. Yeah, there were a lot of ancient buildings that came down in that too. And it's in a area that's very prone to earthquakes. So, all right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Dear Lord, we thank you, Lord, for our church, Lord, for this time we can have together to learn about you, learn about how this country came to be based on your concepts, Lord, and your precepts that you handed down to us. We lift up tonight the people in Turkey, Lord, who are suffering from devastating earthquakes, Lord. We ask that you be with rescue workers and those who are trapped, Lord, that just help guide them, get the people out safely, Lord, and just be with them. We pray for those who are going there to aid in the rescue and to bring food and water, Lord, that you give them safe passage to that area of the world, Lord. And we ask that you be with Bill tonight as he talks to us and helps educate us on the founding of this great country, Lord, that one of the first countries, Lord, that were just directly guided through a revolution using your hand, Lord. And we just praise these things in your name, Lord. Amen.
Okay, does everybody have their little pocket constitution with them tonight? If not, we have extras. But you're going to need it on the next, after the half.
Anybody need one?
My name is Bill Bio. I am with Founders Key, Inc. We are a 501c3 educational foundation, and this is what we do. We go around helping people understand the Constitution, Declaration, and the founding documents and the founders as well. There's my favorite guy. If you had to pick one person in the revolution, even back then, people would pick this guy. He was totally with honor. Everything he did was with honor. And he wasn't a college educated young man. He went to vocational school. He was a surveyor. And it's funny because that really helped him know the lay of the land during the battles and things that they went to. So that was kind of interesting. And coming up on a birthday, if we were having a meeting on the 11th, we'd sing happy birthday, George. And but it's funny, it's a little thing at the bottom there, his actual birthday is February 11th, according to the then used Julian calendar. And in 1752, however, the British and all its colonies adopted Gregorian calendar. So that's what puts his birthday on the 22nd. That's why President's Day. So, Ramirez is my favorite political cartoonist. He comes up with really amazing things. And this is two guys, obviously, they're colonial soldiers, and they're standing out in the bush somewhere, and it says, "Must never forget, revise, or discount the sacrifices made in the name of liberty." And the other guy is saying, nobody would be that foolish. At that time, nobody would. Now, I'm afraid it works. Okay, government is not reason. It is not eloquence, it is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. Never for a moment should it be left to the irresponsible actions. That's who he was talking about. At that time, even, he was saying, look, you're going to have a government, you better stay lively. Because government is like fire. It can warm you, it should. It can burn you up. So what does the Constitution actually say? And then we're going to talk about that tonight. And then what did the founding fathers mean by each word, phrase, and clauses they used in the Constitution? So we have to understand where they were coming from. Does the Supreme Court ruling harmonize with the principles of the Declaration? Sometimes. What was the Supreme Court's rule concerning the words and phrases of the Constitution? We're going to look at a couple of those. Now, last thing is, where and when did they get their ideas originally? How did they come up with this? Because if we were a bunch of people, we were in a colony, and we came from somewhere else, and we said, okay, we've got to set up a government. Where would we start? You ever think about that? Where would you start? That's where they were. Okay? So we have to find the original intent. And it starts back with Polybius. Now, probably if you're in a history class nowadays, you don't know anything about Polybius. But he was a Greek. He was caught during one of the wars and taken back to Rome. And because of his stature, he was a very respected character. And he was involved in the local politics in Greece. And so they gave him a little leeway. They arrested him. He couldn't leave Rome, but he could go about his business. And so he decided to study the different forms of government. And also, because at the time, Rome was at the point, which around 410-ish, was losing their republic. And so he had more in start with that. But he has been the inspiration for Montesquieu's Spirit of the Law and John Locke's two treatises of civil government, which were all read by the founders. It was just standard operating procedure. And they were used by the framers of our Constitution. Now, Montesquieu is one of the, and you'll see him in the book, talking about Montesquieu in your book. And he had read Polybius, but he had his own ideas too. And he gave us things like separation of powers, checks and balances. And that all came pretty much from Montesquieu in the Spirit of the Law. I came up with a three-headed eagle that was used by the founders. And he was divided the government into legislative, executive, and judicial, just like we have. And here's that bird, and it's in your book. I think it's page 24. And I'll tell you what, if you go back to the very back of your book, The back cover has them on the back cover. Or is like one. But anyway, that is a description of our government, the way it's supposed to work. It has 3 heads. The center head is the legislature, and that's broken down into the Senate and the House of Representatives. So it has 2 eyes. The center one has 2 eyes. And then on the other one side is judicial, the other side the executive, and underneath is the article in the Constitution that covers those pieces. Okay? But indeed, it had 2 wings. And one was the problem-solving wing, and the other side was the conservative, realistic wing. Okay? And also along this was notice that the feet. Wow. One side you got a bunch of arrows, and the other side is an olive branch. Those are the 2 options we have. You know, we have to fight, or we can come by things peacefully. But that's on page 24. Notice that all the necks come down into one place. They share a neck, which means they have to have some coordination between the 3 branches. Okay? And going back to Ethelred, which we covered a couple weeks ago, external objects is what the government is supposed to take care of. And that's war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce. That was the 4 things that King Ethelred gave to the Anglo-Saxons. Everything else remains with the state. That's a big statement. We'll look at that. On one side, you get the powers of the federal government are few and defined. James Madison said this in Federalist 45. He said the Constitution is now being formed, and these are the powers that it's going to have. The government is going to be, civil government is supposed to have few and defined powers. They want to put it in a box. Okay? Those that remain with the state are many and unrestricted. Okay? So that's a Federalist 45. Look that up sometime, because it's a fascinating piece. But that's how the government was supposed to be. That's the horizontal separation. Okay? Now, here we have the vertical separation. The government, the federal government, is on top of Big Bird, and then Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution says that every state of the Union will have a republican form of government. Okay? So each state, the power comes down to the states, and then the states have all the power from there. Okay? And that was changed by the 17th Amendment. We'll go over that in a bit. But it goes down to state governments, county governments, townships, families, and finally individuals. But that's on page 24. Okay. 17th Amendment changed all that. And it damaged the relationship between the federal and the state. Okay? Provide for a direct popular election of U.S. senators in 1911. 1911 is kind of interesting, but it was the start. Actually, it was underway already. What we call the administrative state. The administrative state actually started in the late 1800s. But in 1911, it had just gotten started. By the time 1920 hit, Woodrow Wilson turned it on its head. Absolutely took over with the administrative state. And so it was, a lot was taken away from the states and state authority at that time. So it was designed to enhance the authority of the central government and expand the size and power of the federal bureaucracy. That's what it did. You know how many people work for the government? Just a guess. Nobody knows for sure.
Half the population.
Close. About 2.5 million. 2.5 million. And, 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 2.5 million while we can recognize the structural damage this amendment has caused, what happened from something happened over 100 years ago? But if you're going slowly and slowly and slowly, and that's the way the whole thing operates. So what happened then, the power left the states, went directly to the individuals. Individuals voted before state legislatures picked the senator. Okay? Now, who would know them better than the state representatives who work with them, who appoints them, of what kind of a senator they're going to be? Now, are they going to worry about the state? Are they going to worry about writing a book? Or making money through the stock market? But this is what happened. They sidelined the state, and it went right down to the individual. Now, how many individuals do you know are savvy enough to pick a United States senator? Knows all about him. No, there isn't. I mean, I've been doing this about 10 years. And I've come across so many people who said, wow, I didn't know that. When you start telling them about the Constitution and the founders, they just kind of got a lost look on their face because they never heard of it. It's not being taught today in this kind of detail. Did you say you were in a Constitution class or history class?
I'm in multicultural class.
Okay. She was telling me about a professor where she worked, where she goes to school, has got a different idea of things. Would you agree?
Yeah, well, I didn't watch the video yet. It's called Weird People, but their point is they're white men. So that's bad thing.
Old or dead white men.
Bill of Rights was wrote by
Okay. But it weakened the balance between states and federal government, is what 17th Amendment did. And we have talked many, many years about trying to get that repealed. And, and some people take it wrong, perhaps, because they say, well, I want to say I do get who is in my government, so I'd like being able to vote for him. And he asked me a question. What have they done? Because it's not what they say, it's what they've done, isn't it? You got to know who these people are in this time I'm running. Okay, John Adams was very, very instrumental in getting separation of powers in 3 branches of government. And he convinced the Massachusetts government to go with 3 branches. He wrote the Constitution of Massachusetts with the 3 branches, first one. And then he defined politics as a divine science. We don't think that way today, do we? I don't think there's anything divine in politics these days. But as the way they looked at it, it was very, very important. Because if you get somebody, if you elect somebody who doesn't care about these things, who doesn't care about division of power, because it's all about power, remember? Every government that's ever been is about power and who has it. And so this is an important thing. He was the 2nd President of the United States, delegate from the 1st and 2nd Continental Congress. He led the movement for independence, ended the hostiles in France when he was assigned. And that was, and then defended one of the big things he did, one of the first things he did was defend the soldiers at the Boston Massacre. Now, can you imagine what other people would say about John? We just had 5 soldiers fire rifles into a crowd of people and kill some. And he was so stringent about the rule of law. He says they have to be defended. They have to be represented in court. And so he came in and did that. And he doesn't have a national monument. You can go to to Washington DC, and you can see Jefferson, Washington, and all the different monuments that are there, and there's no monument for John Adams. And that's strange because of the work he did. But checks and balances, and this, we have a broad range of checks and balances, and some of the things we're going to cover is the House checks the Senate by not passing a bill constituting them and saying, I don't want this. So they don't pass it. That bill dies at that point. Same thing with the Senate checking the House. The president can check Congress with a veto. But the legislature can come back and say, well, if we can get 2/3 majority, we can override that veto, which is rarely done, by the way. But the Senate can check the president by simply not approving his treaties or not approving the things that he does. Because a lot of the selection of judges in the federal bench have to be okayed by the Senate. And then Congress can check the president with investigations. That's where all the area happened in 2020. And I admit I voted for President Schwartz. But he didn't deserve all that. Didn't deserve all that. And we go back to original intent. We got to find what his original intent was. And in 1892, there was a case that came before the Supreme Court against the church. The lower courts had said, no, they're guilty. What they were guilty of is hiring ministers from England rather than the United States. These men were well qualified. And so they were sued. And so it came to the Supreme Court, and the gentleman that was in charge of the court at the time says, no, they didn't do anything wrong. Yes, you have a law that says you can hire for technical issues outside the United States. But this is not that. Okay, this is different. And so he went by the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law. And the church was not guilty. David Brewer was the justice. In an opinion on a church hired clergyman from England, declared that the United States was a Christian nation. First time it was done. Okay. In ruling, the church, despite the law, had made hiring technically illegal. So it was technical. Okay. And at some point, everybody's got to look around and say, who's going to use their brain best? Okay, there's a founding document hiring. Do you have any questions about that last thing I talked about?
Actually, I do. So what was this actually saying that the church had committed a crime by hiring? Why would the government have anything to do with what the church was hiring? I guess that's...
Well, they made a law. There was a law. And what I've got to pull the whole thing out and look at it yet, that I didn't get to, ran out of time. But the idea is they did not want people hiring the guys who really knew how to build things and put things together. They said, okay, well, people in the United States have those qualities or have those, and so you should hire those first.
So it was to keep jobs local.
Yes.
Here instead of going abroad.
Yeah. And then Judge Brewer looked at it and says, well, wait a minute, these are not plumbers. Okay? These are not house builders, shipbuilders. They're chief. They're masters for sex. And so anyway, the hierarchy, and this comes from this book right here. And I would encourage you every year to check that out. Maybe it is called The Legal Basis for a Moral Constitution. And it was written by Janet Ellis. Janet's been active in the Convention of States movement. She also was in the last, the election before the last one. And, but she has it lays it out wonderful. And it says we have to have it. But this is a hierarchy that we have to realize it is. We have divine law, which gives us natural rights. And natural law, and then it goes, the document is the Declaration of Independence. This is where the authority comes from the divine law. It comes from God. Our rights come from God. This is part of it. The Declaration is the legitimacy of it. Whenever they decided to leave England, they had to find the legal basis for doing that, okay, to make it solid. And so they looked at the Declaration and they said, well, here's what the guy's doing. They made a list of 27 things that he was not doing and that he was usurping their rights. And he says, okay, this gives a justification to make the move. Okay? Then the Federalist came out. The Federalist Papers were 85 documents, 85 essays. That was published in 1787 and 1788, right when the Constitution was being ratified. Okay? And it supported the Constitution. And like Federalist 45, that we saw earlier about the power to the state, the power to the government, that was in Federalist 45. And out of all 85s, there's probably 5 or 6 that's really read a lot. And 45 is one of those. 51, 10 are all ones that people need to read. But they're all good. Even in Federalist 84, Hancock wrote that there was a reason for not having the Bill of Rights. And his thinking was on solid ground. But he needed to be persuaded a little bit. So they talked about it. But finally, you have the supreme law of the land. But it's built on a foundation of authority, legitimacy, and rationale. Okay? And that, like I said, the law and origin and all this legal basis and moral constitution that guides Christians' understanding of the constitutional crisis. Okay? And this is at the very basics. This is natural rights. This is George talking about natural rights. And he's talking to this little kid, and I put this on Facebook, just this picture because I think it's wonderful. And I hear people tell me, what's that kid doing with a gun? He looks like he's 10 years old. What are you doing with a gun? I said, I got my first gun at 7. Okay? So shut up. But he's telling the kid, never forget, I did not grant you the freedom to you. Your freedom was given to you at birth by the Creator. Government's job is to acknowledge and preserve that freedom which is already yours naturally. Isn't that neat? Okay. The sole premise is to preserve inalienable rights under legitimacy of the Declaration and God's vested authority in government to structure itself solely in accordance with divine law. That's it. Now, let's look at where this comes from. There are 2 ways of looking at things. There is the divine law, or natural law, or social contract. What's social contract? And a few people get together and they decide what's right. And this is what we're going to do, whether it's right or not. That's kind of a social contract. The origin is from God or nature. Nature's God. And on social contract, it's man and society that makes it. Okay. Now, the rationale, natural law is fixed and objective. There's a right and there's a wrong to it. Okay? Social contract is fluid and subjective. They change with time. We see that a lot today. We're seeing it right now with things like gender. That just puzzled me how they got that started. And the authority is God's sovereignty. And on the social contract side, it is man's agreement, a collective society. under natural law, the moral law of God's supremacy, and the other one is codified law, man's power of force. One is consistent with biblical truth. The other is changes with the whims of the dominant society. Do you see that happening today? They got things going on. 20 years ago, we were saying, that's just crazy. These people need therapy. Okay. Would a picture of this diagram, a copy of this diagram, help anybody in here?
Yeah.
Okay, I will make copies. Okay, structure of the Constitution. The United States is a fundamental law of the U.S. federal system of government, a landmark document in the Western world. The oldest written national document in use today. The Constitution defines the principles, organs of government, and their jurisdictions, and the basic rights of citizens. Okay? Now, there's a pocket in the Constitution. You got one with you today. It fits in my pocket. Anywhere I go, I can carry it. It's 46 pages. It has a Declaration of the Constitution, Bill of Rights. And it's kind of handy. This one is about 4,000 pages. It is the interpretation of legal over the years. They add about 100 pages to this every year for the change. This is case law. Okay, this is case law. This is what they learn in lawyer schools and things. They learn case law. I had a small argument. We had a little booth at the State Fair a couple of years ago. And we were handing out pocket constitutions and talking to people about the Constitution. And this young lady, I'll be nice, came up, she says, well, what version of the Constitution do you teach? I swear to God, she was being honest. I said, the one that counts. And I told her, I teach from a Judeo-Christian worldview, and so that's what I teach. Okay? And she says, well, that's not very firm, is it? I said, what? And the conversation just drifted away with that. But she was serious. She says, yeah, she didn't learn this stuff in law school. She learned case law. And so, anyway, it's kind of interesting, kind of fun. These are all the cases where the Supreme Court screwed up. Okay? That's just a few. I mean, some of these you may be familiar with Dred Scott, the slave that was taken out to a free state, and the owner of Bookout wanted to keep him, so he wanted him to be a slave and sued him, actually. And Plessy versus Ferguson, that's kind of another one. But it's when a gentleman who was 7/8 white and 1/3 black wanted to set, was not allowed to set, or was made to set in the black car. Okay? Because the railroad had segregated their cars. And there was a black car. And so he went to court. Everson versus Board of Education, you know that one, to throw out of school. Actually, it didn't, but it made it much, much harder. Kids can still pray in school. Let's see. That's another good one. Well, you know, Roe versus Wade, Obergefell versus Hodges, same-sex marriage. And all these things were taken from the social contract version rather than the divine law version. Okay? So, you know the length of an average constitution in the world? Take a guess.
20 years.
20 years. Anybody else? Now, there's 190 countries. Not all of them have a constitution, but a lot of them do. They took ours as a template. Well, the average age of a constitution is 17 years. You're close. We are at 236 years right today. Same one that was written in 1787. That's pretty good. Now here's some of the other countries. France has had 15 since 1789. Haiti, rather. Brazil, Ecuador had 20 since 1830. Philippines, 7 since 1899. Afghanistan's had 6 since 1923. And they weren't supposed to do that. Russia had 4. South Africa, and let me see what we can come across this. No, I can't get on the bottom. Something happens in my computer when I put it in, when you play it. It's like a different font. There's a gremlin in my computer. I gotta get into it. Jason, I need to talk to you about computers. America's had 1 since 1787. Charters granted by liberty. In Europe, charters of liberty have been granted by power. In America, set the example of charters of power granted by liberty. Totally different point of view. Principles of government, and when I talk about republicanism, I'm not talking about a party. I always like to say that because it was, hey, Republican. Limited government, separation of powers, checks and balances, individual rights, federalism, and consent of the government. Those is what the Constitution is based on. And here's how it all came about. When is the 4th of July? What day? 4th of July 4th. Everybody said July 4th. That really wasn't our date of independence. Our actual Independence Day was July the 2nd, when they passed the Lee Resolution. You can see it was 1 paragraph. Okay? But they did some important things around that time too. Matter of fact, before that time, on June 11th, they appointed the Committee of 5 who was going to write the Declaration of Independence. And on that was John Adams, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Robert Livingston, the one from New York, and Roger Sherman, who is really, he's not honored the way he should. He did a lot of great things. Think about it. Now, the other 2 things they did, they did 2 more committees while they were having a meeting on June 11th. They had a committee to start preparing the Articles of Confederation. And they had a committee that was supposed to contact other countries and see if they would support our independence. And so that's what they set up on that. Again, it was a Lee Resolution was presented, it was debated, and then it was voted on. And it was unanimous. Then we had the Declaration of Independence. It came out on the 4th of July. And that's the first public reading on the 4th of July. And from there, 1777, we had the Articles of Confederation. And that was our first attempt at a constitution. Okay? Didn't work out well, though. We'll get to that. They had a lot of problems with it because it made the central government too weak. The central government couldn't do anything. And then, so they set up a meeting at Annapolis in 1786. And they met there and they said, okay, we've got to revise the Articles of Confederation. And so they started putting something together, debating, talking, and they said, okay, we're going to start over. There's just too many fleas on this dog. And so that's when they started preparing the Constitution of the United States. The Federalist, Anti-Federalist papers came out. Federalist papers were in support of the Constitution. The Anti-Federalists were not. And the Federalists won that argument. There was 85 essays from Hamilton, and John Jay, and James Madison. Hamilton wrote the largest bunch of those. Okay. Madison wrote about 12 or 13. There is some controversy on who wrote a couple. And John Jay wrote 5 because he had fallen ill while all this was going on and couldn't complete the duties. But then the Constitution came in, and then we had the Bill of Rights added to it because there's about 14 people walked out of the convention, the Constitution convention, because it had no Bill of Rights. George Mason was the leader of the bunch. Good guy. So, the Articles of Confederation, from the beginning of the American Revolution, Congress felt the need for a stronger union. Now, put yourself in their place. We just got away through a costly war with blood and money to get away from an overbearing government. So, what you would probably want to do is stay as far away from an overbearing government as possible. And so they wanted to make the government weak, but you can make it too weak. You can make it where it can't function, and that's what happened with the Articles. And November 7, 1770, the final Articles, much altered at a long deliberative process, was approved and submitted. So it went into effect in 77. Okay? And here's what they found out. 2 weeks, it had no executive. There was no three branches of government. There was no executive. The president of the meeting, the congressional meeting, was president. Okay? But he didn't have an office. He was just designated. Somebody's got to. Okay? Okay, no, they had no judicial. They had no judges set up, nothing set up for judges. And they had very weak checks and balances, unable to collect money. We almost lost the war because of it. Because the states wasn't paying hardly any money toward the cause of separating from England. You remember the stories of Valley Forge when men without shoes walking through the snow, they froze to death? They didn't have uniforms, they didn't have clothes. Matter of fact, a bunch of the ladies in Boston went together and made shirts for them. And there was a bunch of other things that went on during that time that people wanted to support what was going on. And so each state had one vote. It doesn't matter population, you get one vote. So the little states kind of said, well, that's not too bad. The big states said, hey, wait a minute. That's not fair. They were difficult to amend that Constitution because you had to have unanimous consent on all amendments. Okay? So let's say you got 65, 70 people in this committee. Every one of them had to consent. Can you be in any room with any amount of people and they all agree? It ain't even possible. So they had that problem. And the currency was a problem because each state coined their own money. They made their own money. So living here in Kansas, if we went to Missouri, we'd have to get different money if we was going to go buy something in Missouri. Now, well, we were not there yet. But if you lived in Pennsylvania and you wanted to go to the other colonies and states, you had a different money exchange. Think of what a problem that would be. Regulate trade. They couldn't regulate trade. And this is what would happen. The coastal states would make treaties with other countries about their trade. Only if they wouldn't sell it, like if Virginia had the treaty, but you couldn't sell it to New York. You couldn't sell it. That kind of thing. They didn't have, they were trying to control the money, and then they would charge terrific tariffs or taxes on what they sold if you were in one country, one state, and you bought it in a different state. So, the currency was a problem, foreign policy was a problem, because they were forming associations with other countries, okay? Everybody was interested in the United States because it was a new land. It was growing like crazy. And so everybody wanted a piece of the action. And when you became the state of Virginia, I'll pick on them, they would set up these things. These things would trade under the agreement. They agreed not to trade with any other states. Is that fair? Why? We're one United States. And then Shays' Rebellion was a bunch of people who were rebelling at the awesome taxes that were being charged on, and they had a debtor's prison. And that's just wrong on any case. But that really was an interesting thing, because they had to call out the militia, and George Washington had to put together a militia to put this down, and so it wouldn't spread. There was a couple others about the same thing. Okay, here's some things that are just wrong with the record with the Party of Confederation. Levying taxes, they couldn't require states to pay taxes. Okay, so when a war was going on and needed funds for equipment, they couldn't get it. Federal courts, there was no federal court system. And on the Constitution, we had federal courts were major. It was created to deal and solve problems between citizens and states. And you can look at the rest of these. Again, you had no executive power. Executive branch was headed by the president under our Constitution. Under there was no executive power. The president simply presided over Congress. So, okay, to get something passed, I already talked about, it took 13 states to amend anything. Congress should make a raising army. They couldn't make an army draft troops in the states or have volunteer soldiers. It was just a mess. And so the Constitution came to be. And it was adopted in convention September 17, 1787, and was subsequently ratified by the several states on the following dates. And you see it took a while to get through the process. They needed 9 states to ratify. And Delaware was the first, and that was a little unusual, but there's the one that was real rough. Rhode Island, they called it Rhode Island, was one of the last to come on board. But what we got, the Constitution is 4 pages, and then we have the Bill of Rights that was attached in 1791. So, want to take 5 minutes? Okay. Okay. This is a fabulous book if you have young ones, grandkids or kids. This is through the National Center of Constitutional Studies. And what it is, it's simply a Q&A. United States policy. But this is wonderful. Huh? Yeah.
So you don't see that anymore?
No, it's a shame. That's why I'm really glad that the center did this. Because this would be great for parents saying, let's see what you're studying and start to go to what really works.
History teachers.
Yeah. Oh.
Oh, thank you. Oh, but it's so sweet.
So you just want the.
She had a guy
Yeah, so she can
who ran some units there.
things for.
He got promoted
So we can do
It's, you know, Al,
as like a regional guy.
you're not okay.
And she picked up all the properties.
Yeah,
Because I'm like, well, I can never recreate what you've done here, but I want her to write all the stuff that she has from you to reflect on
Yeah.
that. It's like,
But they don't really, they don't want to really
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Oh,
Oh, so it's not like from
That building will rock.
How you guys doing? Do you have your pocket consultation with you? Okay, I'll get you.
Isn't that neat?
But it's like the Chiefs and the. And then Eagle, and I remember at Eagle. And somebody said, well,
Oh, that's
you
pretty
just
cool.
put it down there. But then you couldn't tell.
I couldn't tell what it said
Right.
for anybody, yeah.
Right.
Can you put an ink behind
So
it?
that's the.
I love the thing that was floating around Facebook that said, those boys better fly her first class. Second, you know, 5-star. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they can afford that.
Here's
Yeah.
Someone give us more of some Pardon me?
Got one.
Yeah.
I mean, the last thing which I
If anybody would like a pocket constitution to give to somebody, I've got a few extra.
Yeah,
Would you like one?
I don't know a lot about that. I know he started hanging out with us after Steve first went trouble time in Florida.
Yes, now it's nice.
Yeah,
I carry these in my back pocket.
yeah.
Go to the grocery store, I have
I pocket see much more than that. Yeah,
That's a good conversation.
You know, we were watching a show last night, a TV show that was on back in 2003. And, you know, if you listen to the search shows, you'll hear stuff. And that was one of the things that they had brought up in the show. Well, just hire a okay. It's just like, it's weird how you plant those little seeds.
I'm looking for people who would like to teach this colors.
Yeah.
So if you would like to teach this kind of thing to others,
Yeah.
please call me.
I hadn't heard anything like this.
Speaking of being streets, cousin and I.
I don't know.
Oh, you're okay. Founders Gate meets on the third Thursday of the month out at Perkins Restaurant in Garden. If you ever want to come out, we just have a conversation about, we'll stick a topic out. We'll just shoot forward and have one. There is a possibility we may be doing one of these in Franklin County. I got a note from Kathy today. She says, the person in Franklin is interested in having one of these things. So I'm looking forward to that. That's exciting.
So I have a quick question.
Well, let's go over the Constitution.
Somebody has a question.
I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
So you talked about the federal government being stronger since the Second Amendment. Is it my imagination or within the three branches of the federal government, it seems like the executive branch has gotten stronger and stronger? Maybe it's just all the COVID stuff in recent years that they've held all these more business problems.
Yeah, I see this.
Boy, there were still, people getting in trouble. Now, court cases recently are showing, no, that was illegal, you can't prosecute people, but still, it just seems like they've gotten out of whack.
See, that's how the government usurps free. They just make a law and they expect everybody to go along with it. We don't have to do that.
The thing I read, I was surprised that I heard, when I was reading the book this week,
Yes, ma'am.
where it says the federal government, the federal government can't do welfare.
They really can't. It's not.
It's a state.
But they
I'm
do.
sitting here going, we do it all the time.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
And year after year, they make these bills, you know, spending bills, and they have all that in there. It's like,
Well, it's things we find out there we knew that we didn't know anything about. And they have that power because we didn't do anything to stop them. And if we don't stop them, then we have to Okay, the Constitution is divided into articles. You have the preamble, and then you have the 7 articles. And the thing that I want to make clear through all my presentation, the Declaration and Constitution are never to be separated. If they have if a Supreme Court judge goes against what is in the Declaration of Independence as our principles, something is wrong. Okay? If the government does something that would go against the principles of the Declaration of Independence, it's wrong. We were just talking about the COVID mandates. Think about that. Who gave them the right to do that? It's not that they can tell me to do it, they just do it. And they're waiting for people to say, well, you can't do that. And some people did, and some people didn't. But they try to use that power, that force of government, to make you think they can. And they spend a lot of money with that. I'd have to apologize to you. I'm keeping you away from the presidential speech tonight.
Oh, we are so sad.
I want to stay home.
When I get home tonight, I'll see what Tucker had to say about that. The Declaration is a national right. It is God's law. It talks about equality, not equity. Equity is bad. Equality is good. It talks about rights, consent, revolution, and the Constitution of the 7 articles, and which is the process, which messes up on my computer. But it says power, process, or structure. Okay. On every question of Constitution, of construction, excuse me, let us carry ourselves back to the time when the Constitution was adopted, recollect the spirit of the debate, and instead of trying what meaning may be squeezed out of the text or invented against it to conform one in which it was passed. That's a mouthful. It's absolutely right. How many times has that happened that you know? Tom was a good guy.
You know, it seems to me when you read the Constitution, it's not legalese. It's straight, it's common man language, I guess you could say.
And so you really don't need an 8-year degree to understand the intent.
No. Oh, I was walking around this book. I would highlight this. The National Center for Constitutional Studies. This is a $5 book, but the whole thing is on the Constitution, and it's question and answer. It's all Q&A. And like here says, let me pick one out here. On naturalization.
Bill, what was the name of that book again? What was that book again?
Yeah, it is the Elementary Catechism on the Constitution of the United States, written 1828. This was used in schools. This is what the kids learned about government in school in 1828. And this comes in a small that you can stick in your pocket. And I order these and give them. But let me pick a couple that are just fun. Someone had really long-winded answers that I won't go into. It says, but if even the Congress itself should make a law which is contrary to the Constitution, must people obey it? The answer is no. And we find another shorter one here. And in fact, I'll just pass it around and you can look at it. Why, let's see, let's go to the question. In what country do we live in the United States of America? Why is the country called the United States? Because it was made up of a number of states which were once separate, but afterwards agreed to unite together. Have the different states which united together, each a government of its own? Yes. But they agreed to put themselves all under one government and share that responsibility. Why did they do this? Because it would promote the general welfare. I mean, it's just that simple. And if I had a class in school of some probably middle schoolers, I would have all of these. One of these every one. But I'll pass it around and let you guys look at it. Okay. Do not separate text from historical background, says if you do, you will have a perverted or subverted constitution which can only end in a distorted, bastardized form of legitimate government. That makes sense? Madison. This guy was amazing. When Thomas Jefferson was out of the country while the Constitution Convention was going on. He wasn't there. But he kept in contact as best he could. You know, a letter probably took 2 weeks to get somewhere. But he wrote Jefferson a letter and said, look, we're going to have this convention going on. Can you send me some books to read? And Thomas Jefferson sent him 2 steamer trunks full of books. And it said he read every one of them. He was the most intelligent person. He was about 5'2". Not a large. See, Jefferson, well, Washington was 6'2". Jefferson was 6 foot, was a 6 footer. But he had the biggest brain among them. It's amazing. We talked about the Federalist Papers authored by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. But it promoted the ratification. Federalist Paper number 84 is the key. The reason it's a key is because Hamilton is talking about why you don't need a Bill of Rights. Now, people didn't go along with that, but he made a good argument. Federalists, commonly referred to as the Federalist Papers of Series 85. I'll read to you this. They wrote under the name of Publius, which was a Roman general. and they were written in support of the Constitution. These should be perused. I mean, they really should be checked out. Preamble, Constitution. We the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union. That always puzzles me. What's more than perfect? That doesn't mean more than perfect. We want something more than perfect. Establishes justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and prosperity, ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States. Now, general welfare did not mean what it does today. Okay, there are the three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. Article 1. Article 1 is composed or based on two legislative chambers. We have a House of Representatives and a Senate. Under the New Jersey plan, each state had the same number of representatives. Under the Virginia plan, representation was based on population. They went with the Virginia plan. The Great Compromise was posed by Roger Sherman. Remember, he said that Roger Sherman is underrated because he did so many things. And Oliver Ellsworth, two delegates in Connecticut. The Senate should have 2 representatives. All the states get the same, 2. And the House of Representatives will be based on population. That sounded really fair to everybody, so they did okay with that. Now, establishes House of Representatives, requires the qualifications, must be 25 years old, be a resident for 7 years, live in the state that they represent. It's a 2-year term. That means we can change them every 2 years. Okay. The House chooses a speaker to lead the meetings. They make law, divided into 10 sections. Now that means the statute or the article is in 10 sections, and each section deals with Congress, Senate, House legislatures, but they're all in your Legislative Constitution. Okay. On to the legislature skill, the Senate. Qualifications must be 30 years old, year of age, be a citizen for 9 years, live in the state they represent. It is a 6-year term. Because the House was supposed to be the ones who bring in and vote over what people are needing. And the House was supposed to be deliberative. That we look at this and say, can we afford it? How will this work? They're supposed to be the deliberative branch. Not so much. And 6 years, so a third of them each, every 2 years, or every election cycle, a third of them is going to be up for election. Okay? And so they rotate it. And then they set the role for the vice presidency. The president is the head of the Senate, and they have certain powers. Impeachment is one of those procedures. Powers listed what they can do, what they cannot do, and powers denied to the states. That's where the 17th Amendment really came in. It changed that relationship. So it's not a good thing. Okay? Article 2, Executive Branch. President enforces the law. Yes. Qualifications, natural born, be at least 35 years of age, and a U.S. resident for 14 years. He is the chief executive leader of the federal government, which is huge. 2.5 million people roughly. Because nobody really knows how many agencies there are. And if you look at that, just Google it sometime and say, how many federal branches, not branches, but offices do we have? And if you look at one and then another one and another one, none of them has it right. Because they can't name them all. The administrative state really took over in the 1920s under President Wilson. And what they said that is that the United States should not be run by the people, for heaven's sakes. It should be run by experts. It should be run by people with degrees. Things like that. George Washington didn't have a degree. He couldn't have been anything. You can't look here. Oh my. But that's the way that the administrative realm thinks. And what they did in 1920 to carry on, it started before that. They were building that too. But Woodrow Wilson was a terrible, terrible person. He was also a racist, an actual racist.
Did he,
I'm not
is
calling
he
him
the
that
one
because I
that,
don't like him. What?
is he the one that started the rules on segregation?
That came a little bit later. But he was a known racist. Everybody knew. He had a movie came out that time, and I can't remember the name, but it debuted.
Birth of a Nation.
That's it. And it was played in the White House, or in the Capitol. But it was
About the Klan.
Yeah.
He didn't even die. Okay, let's see one. Okay. This is Article 2 again. 4 sections, one on the oath of office, the State of the Union, taking tonight. That is a duty by Constitution. Presidential powers, executive responsibilities, impeachment, salaries, treaties, advice and consent of the Senate and pardons. That's all the things that he is supposed to do. Supreme Court. Here's an interesting piece. It's 3 sections. Congress has the power to create its other courts. They can create federal branches. Okay? Judicial jurisdiction and judicial review is part of their work. Treason they have to adjudicate. Serious acts of betrayals. Supreme Court is the highest law in the land. Judicial branch consists of Supreme Court and the lower federal courts. Okay? So you know that Supreme Court justices have a lifetime appointment. Okay? So does the other judges in the federal system. So it's not just 9 guys we have to worry about. It's all the others. These are lifetime appointments.
Why do you think they did that?
Excuse me?
Why do you think they did that?
Lifetime.
Okay. When they did that, judges were supposed to be above politics.
Oh, nice comment.
And for a while they were. But remember what happens to people when they have power.
Yep.
Power takes on.
And
And
they were so careful about everything else with the power thing.
Yep.
You would have thought they would have thought of this one as well.
And they thought that by having a lifetime appointment, they wouldn't be swayed by a come-in election. That I'll go ahead and pass this. I'll go ahead and sign off on this because I'm up for re-election in November. If I get this, will you vote for me? So they want to remove that. That's why they went with a lifetime. Let's see here. The term begins by statute on the first Monday of October. Now this is when they're in session. Okay. First Monday in October. Usually the court sessions continue until late June or July. We're in one right now. Or actually, we're just almost in one at the end of them. Justices are nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Have you been watching any of those on television? They are just nuts. Let me show you one here in a minute. Let me get past this. Specific qualifications for a justice. The age, education, profession. The justice does not have to be a lawyer or a law graduate, but all justices have been trained in law. Okay? Many of the 18th, 19th century justices studied law under a mentor. The last justice to be appointed who did not attend a law school was James Bryan in 41 to 42. He was not a graduate from high school, but he taught himself law, passing the bar at age 23.
Wow.
He was driven. He liked it. Robert Jackson, 41 to 54. While Jackson did not attend an undergraduate school, he did study law at Albany Law School in New York. 29 years later, the Albany School elated presented him with a degree. That was nice. Okay, here is a couple of real special. The first one in the upper right, your right, is a lady from Washington State. She's up being interviewed to be a federal district court justice. Okay? And God bless the senator from Louisiana, John Kennedy. He is just a miracle. Ask her about what was Article 5 about. She didn't know. She said, it doesn't come to mind right yet. Okay. And he says, well, how about Article 2? Presidential power. That doesn't come to mind right now. And then we have this gentleman. Will not answer when life begins or how many genders there are. And then we have another one down here. Denied making disparaging remarks on Twitter. And they were really disparaging. They were nasty. And again, it was Senator Kennedy. And he says, well, here, I've got a copy of it if you'd like to read it. And the guy just kind of wilted down. But look what happened with this one, who has been, she's already been confirmed. She's on the Supreme Court. She was asked, do you hold a position on whether an individual possesses natural rights? Okay. Simple. She says, I do not hold a position on whether individuals possess natural rights. How is she going to see cases? How's she going to?
Well, she also can't define woman. She also couldn't define woman.
Exactly. That was the next one. But she's on the Supreme Court, for heaven's sakes. And we're being bombarded. You have to call it what it is, guys. It's just evil. It's a way the evil men approach it. Anyway, their joy. Okay, relations to the states. This is Article 4. And this is where the federal government and the states get together and decide who should do what. Okay? And Section 1, full faith and credit to the states, honor one another's laws and records and courtrooms. Now, this rule prevented a person avoiding justice by leaving the state. That was good. Okay. So I shoot somebody and I go to Missouri. Okay, I can't do that. Section 2, citizens of each state shall be entitled to a privilege and immunity that automatically goes to citizens of those states. It simply means citizens can travel state to state without any problem. Now, there are things that you have to be a little careful about. Concealed, I taught the legal part of concealed carry for a while, and if you're going to carry concealed, you have to make sure you're going to travel to a state where we have reciprocity. It means they share the same things we think about gun laws. And Kansas is a constitutional carry state. Okay, we put that in effect probably 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. That is a big deal. Anyone can carry a concealed weapon without having a permit. Okay. Now, the only problem I have with that, I wish they would have required some type of training. Because a lot of people are going to shoot themselves in the foot or worse. Because, you know, when somebody's breaking in your home, you get a little excited, and your adrenaline goes up. And where you point that thing makes a difference. And we always told the students, be sure to shoot them on the way out.
Drag one leg back.
As long as they're in your house, you're fine. So yeah, that was one thing, I wish they would have had some type of a training requirement on that. Because I honestly got, we probably trained 100 or so people over that time. And we had one nice lady, very nice lady, she didn't know that long. And I'm not going to get into age, but she worked full time and she was robust. And the first, when you go to the range to shoot, you have 3 lengths that you have. The first one's from 8 feet. The next one's from like 15 or 16 feet. And the last one is from back there somewhere. Okay? And you have to hit the target. Okay, this lady was not hitting the target at 8 feet. And so, whatever I want you, and what she was doing, she was putting her entire finger on the trigger. And what that automatically does is pull the gun to the right. That's it. Try this. Use the tip of your finger. Use the tip. Steady. Don't flick, don't jerk. And she finally did it right. But without any kind of training at all, there are people out there who is going to not hit the target. So, but most people learn how to shoot easily. That was my only kick with that thing. Amending the Constitution, where do we get to? Oh, we're going to have to real quick, guys. You want me to continue this next time?
Yeah.
Okay, I will continue this next time. We are just south of 8 o'clock. Is there anything you'd like to know about? Is there any questions you have you'd like me to check out? Sir.
So, they used, was it left up to the states how the senator got elected? Because I wasn't sure if it was the legislative bodies from each state elected their senators, or you pick the governor and then the governor would pick the senators and they had recall rights also.
That's what it is now. And back then, the legislature selected the senator, and that's who went to Washington.
Right.
And
Now they recall them, that senators like not doing what they wanted. I mean, would they have the ability to recall?
yes,
that senator?
they would have the ability to recall. But
Because that gives the state a lot of power that the state doesn't have that anymore.
no, it doesn't. Who's watching out for the states? No one. And so, if there's anything that I would want to change today, well, besides the whole lot from mine, would be the 17th Amendment. Because they stepped all over states' rights when they did.
But didn't the states step all over themselves? Because they're the ones that have to approve the amendments,
That one, see anything that?
Well, the people approve the amendments.
What?
The people would have to approve the amendment by 2/3 vote.
2/3 of the states, I think, you know.
I thought it was 2/3 I thought it was a direct vote for an amendment to the Constitution.
I thought state.
I could be wrong.
I didn't hear.
So if you have an amendment to the Constitution,
Yeah.
is that a direct vote or do the states vote?
Congress people vote.
Well, Congress doesn't vote for the amendment.
Congress
It has to be approved by the states. 2/3 states. would vote
How does the
on it.
voting in the states occur to ratify an amendment?
There, and I can talk about convention of states, the way is another way of amending it. And with that, you have to have 34 states that want to have a convention. You go to Congress, you say, okay, we have 34 states, we're requesting a convention. They put the convention in effect, the delegates come in from the states, and then it has to go out for ratification. Once they approve a set of laws, it goes out to the states, and they have to ratify. And it has to be 3/4, which means 62 states.
But how does that voting occur? Is that the
It's-
population?
No, it's
Or
state
is it the
legislature.
state legislature that votes to ratify the amendment?
It's on page 20.
So we put idiots in our legislature, which is kind of shocking.
I guess they're important more than we think.
Yes, at least they think so.
They used to be. They voted themselves out.
That was the.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we are.
And that would double check it, which means it's.
That's why it's important it comes from the bottom up, not necessarily the top down.
What does that section say?
So it says, resolved by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, 2/3 of both houses are concurring that the following articles be proposed to the legislatures of the several states as amendments to the Constitution of the United States, all or any of which articles, when ratified by 3/4 of the said legislatures, to be valid to all intents and purposes as part of the Constitution. So, has to pass Congress by 2/3, goes to the states legislatures, and the state legislatures have to approve by 3/4.
That's not, that's been revised.
Yeah.
That's further amended. Because now they can pass a law in Washington DC that affects you, and the only way that the states cannot, they say, I'm gonna nullify it. I'm not gonna do it. But we don't get to vote on this anymore since the 17th Amendment. So, anyway, anything else? Did you learn anything?
Can you print out how that's all, what you're going over? Can you print that out for us?
Which one?
That explains the Constitution, the
Oh,
whole thing, all the
I think Bob's
articles.
talking about.
all the articles. Oh, here you go. That was my last line. Let me come back to you. There's a way we can fix all this. Every 2 years is a vote. And we can vote them out. And it's set, the turnout. Okay?
And, one thing I've seen too is, people are involved locally in their parties, and, the parties select who you're gonna vote for.
They sure try.
So,
Sure try. But to tell you, the numbers are staggering. The number of people who don't vote. Honest to God. We got Laura Kelly as governor the first time because 77,000 Republican voters did not vote in Kansas. 77,000. And she won over, I think, by like 15,000 votes. Sound like, we're one of those 77,000 people who didn't vote. And I've had a slide, I can show you how that took place, I'll have to pull it up for you.
but when you don't vote, it also opens your state up to corruption or voter fraud.
Absolutely.
Because now they have a voter database that they can change live, and they can monitor live. They know who voted and who didn't vote. And in some areas, around Detroit, you had 300% voting turnout. But the people didn't know it because most of them didn't vote. And they know who doesn't vote. There's a system called ERIC that tracks
whoever is voting is not voting.
No.
And if you don't vote, they'll vote for you. You'll never know it. So,
Well, I have coworkers that, for their entire family, I thought, oh, it's just because she's young and she's in her 20s, but her entire family, they don't vote because your vote doesn't count, so we just
Yep.
don't vote. And I'm sitting there going, you have to vote, like it's. you
I
have
used to
vote.
believe that. I said, you know what, my vote doesn't count. I just didn't vote for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, it does matter.
Right.
So,
Now, we have to
because if you don't vote, they'll do it for you.
Right.
We have to treat voting as a sacred right, because it is. There's no,
I think it should be a national holiday, we should all,
Yeah.
there's no excuses.
It should be a requirement.
And we should all be able to, I mean, I've never not voted because of work, but I know some people have that issue. And,
well, primaries are worse. The average primary turnout is maybe 14 to 25%. And for a full-blown, when 2024 comes around, the average is about 51, between 49 and 51%. Show up to vote. And that's just sad, because we don't change it.
When you have districts that have, 98, or Johnson County had 100% voter turnout in 2020. I mean, a good year is 60%. They had 100%. That's
Yeah,
why
it's magic.
Sheriff Hayden is looking into.
Even those people that didn't go to the polls voted.
Well, some states had dead people voting, so that's a whole nother thing.
Jason, I have a technical question. She would like a copy of the thing.
The video. The
Slides.
The slides that explain the parts of the Constitution.
the articles.
Let me go back and see if I can find the one real quick.
I would like a copy of the articles also.
Articles of Confederation.
No, the articles that you were just going over
Okay,
on the Constitution where you broke it down.
okay, show me which ones you like. Well, it's very easier to.
That one, that one.
That's one of them.
No, go.
Yeah, go back
Yeah,
a little bit
like
further.
that, Article 7 where it explains,
Yeah, Articles of Ratification.
but all of
But
them.
the other ones.
All.
Article 1,
All
2,
the
3,
articles.
4, all the
Okay.
articles.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
They're not copyrighted. You can play with them as you want. I trust all of you.
It's just nice to have it explained.
Yeah, I think what
In
she's talking about
everyday
was like,
words.
it said, I think it was after the foundation pyramid.
Yeah, and you said like Article 1 was of the president, Article 2 was the judicial. Yeah, those.
Yeah, all of them.
That one?
Yeah, all the others, all the,
The other ones,
all,
that, okay.
Article 1,
Okay.
Article 2, 3, 4.
Well, I think if we just get, can we put it on a zip drive? You have a zip drive? You put it on?
I can get one.
I don't have one.
They can do just a,
Can't you just print them?
We're
Yeah.
recording this, so there should be a recording somewhere. Like,
Does it make sense what I'm asking for?
Yeah.
Can you just print your slides off? Can you print them off on a paper?
He'll send them to me and I'll get them printed off for
Yeah,
you.
just print them off.
Yeah, let's do it black and white, because
Yeah.
copies on color is 51 cents a piece or something stupid.
Oh, I know, paper.
I have no problem sharing anything that I give you guys.
I got a question for you.
So anyway,
Bill,
Bill?
yeah,
Hey, so, when you look at the Declaration of Independence and then you look at the presidential lineup, right? When did the party system really start taking affecting the presidency and all that? I mean, obviously, Washington was not.
18. One of the worst, the nastiest elections was the one between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. Absolutely brutal. They said Jefferson was an atheist, and they didn't believe in God or anything. I mean, they said all kinds of things, and they said the same things about Adams. So, there's been nasty, nasty elections.
So are you saying there was mudslinging even back then?
Even back then.
Instead of doing signs, they would hand out pins. They would get little pins that they gave to people so you know who voted through, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I got a sticker by it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's see, was there anything else? Anybody else have any questions or anything?
So way back when, did they start aligning themselves left, right?
Well, the parties were different.
Democrat and Whigs.
And Jefferson was a Democratic Republican Party. That's what, it wasn't an official party. That's just how they leaned. Parties didn't show up till a little bit later. I mean, the Republicans didn't, I can't remember the date.
1860.
Yeah, and
So it was 4 years before that. 1856, the Republican Party was formed.
right. And
4 years later, they won the presidency. So
And they had a big meeting in Michigan.
But the terms of left and right comes from the European parliaments, I believe. And
Yes, that and
and
the
which
devil.
side of the room they actually sat at.
What she's referring to is that they set the more liberal voters on the left and the more conservative voters on the right, even as far back as what you're talking about in the 1600s, 1700s. But yeah, I mean, it's always been a right left thing. But why should it be? Why should it be?
I thought Abraham Lincoln was a Republican.
yeah, he was.
He was.
And when you say this, we didn't get the Republican and the Democrat is who?
So it was Democrat and Whigs, and the Whigs splintered off over the racism debate about slavery. And that's when the Republican Party was formed, just because of slavery. And part of them became Republicans, and part of the Whigs became Democrats.
And when was that?
1856, I believe.
The Whigs were a party ever since England.
Yeah.
And they were way bigger, a little more conservative.
But I thought I'd seen a quote from Washington too. He didn't like the parties because he says at some point, and you see it today, the parties will do what's in the party's best interest and not what's in the best interest of the people.
Right.
Yeah, his farewell address is a fantastic piece of literature. And Washington's farewell address actually paints a picture of what's going on today. It's just that prominent. But there was a lot of warnings along the way. I mean, the way our government was set up, it was to try to avoid those arguments, avoid those things. Because if you take God out of the picture, where are you going to go with a lot of the things that they do? I mean, if they're not going by the Declaration of Independence, the principles involved there, then they're out of line. Not there to live everything together. And so, I don't care for the party system, I really don't. I was born a Republican, and I'm registered as a Republican. I'm a Republican precinct committee captain. But I believe in heading against the wall because we're fighting about the wrong things. You know? But some of the things that they have come up with just go against the science they say they follow. There's only two genders. There's no one else to cut. And but they have been sold with this lie. This, you can be anything you want to be. That is when a true progressive is. The same thing that happened when they started having the administrative state. Wilson thought that it should be run by experts. Whether they got common sense or not. You know, so when we start putting things behind names, But have to remember that common sense is at the base of everything.
I think that one of our problems is that we have allowed politics to become a profession.
Correct. It was never, ever, ever, ever supposed to do that. People were supposed to Washington and then go back to the farm, or go back to their business, or go back to work. That's not the way anymore.
And
It's a big, you're absolutely correct.
And I may be wrong, but I think that's one of the reasons that they didn't like Trump, because he wasn't a politician.
Right. And he,
I mean, there's a lot of reasons they probably didn't like him.
he was an amazing guy, and the problem, part of it is that Bronx, the Bronx comes up, and but he, my God, just what he accomplished on his own, all on his own, he did it, and he knew how big operations work, and so he knew what was going, even though he'd never been in government.
He didn't play by their rules.
He didn't play by the rules. The biggest fear they had is that he'll be back. And if he comes back and if he wins, he's got nothing to lose. He can't run again.
They're trying to do everything they can to keep him out.
You know.
Because they're failing.
I'm sorry, sir?
They're failing and keeping him out.
Well, they're going to try. I don't know. I would be okay with it. I love DeSantis. I think he was a good man.
Personally,
there's some good ones.
I think conservatives in general loved his policies, but he's so divisive in his verbiage, and he just doesn't
He's
know.
New York.
So,
Yeah, his tweets had a purpose. I mean, his tweets were really naughty. But they had a purpose for him. This is his thinking. Wrote a good book about him. But he's the kind of guy, once he stopped on the highway, there's some people that he was stopped on the highway, and something wrong with his car. And somebody came by and gave him a rock. And about 2 weeks later, they got a notice that their house was paid off. There's all kinds of stories about Trump like that. And, oh boy, they hate to hear that kind of stuff. But you always know that they're barking on the wrong tree when they start getting sex into the thing. Something had to be sexual. But it's all emotion. It comes from not in your heart.
And they would, I heard that one of the complaints I heard constantly was, well, he's such a womanizer.
Yeah, he was a woman.
And how many people have we had in politics?
You are, I know.
All the way back to King David.
Yeah.
Saul,
Look at Solomon.
I mean,
They were
Judah.
The list would be long.
But they had a purpose that God used
God,
them.
yeah. John Kennedy had a few.
What I liked about Trump is he's a businessman.
Yes.
Get up and run the
Yes.
country as a
Yeah.
business.
yes.
That's what I liked about him.
What I like about it is that every promise he made, he kept.
Right.
Right.
That's right.
And
Children and grandchildren.
they were corrupt.